Hi, my name's Declan Goodman and I'm the host of the Digital Mythology podcast. Welcome. I'm very excited about this podcast. I've been in IT tech for too many years. You can tell by the grey hair. I am very excited to start this podcast. It's about, in my view, digital transformation is difficult. It's hard work and a lot of money spent on it. But what, in my view, there hasn't been enough investment on is telling the story. Everybody loves a good story. Everybody needs a story they can connect with, they can feel. Everybody needs to be able to identify with a good story. And that's what I'm here to do in this podcast, to help you use tips and tricks from ancient mythology, from modern day approaches to digital tech to win the hearts and minds of your stakeholders, to use metaphors so that you can gain understanding and to ignite their passion and interest in what you're doing so you win stakeholder buy-in and you can be overall more successful. I will be inviting guests onto the podcast. I want to hear from people's experience in this space, and I'm very excited to be able to do this with my audience and to talk through tips and tricks on how to make things overall more successful for you. So, without further ado, let's get started. Welcome back. Declan Goodman here, your Digital Mythology host. Today I'm going to talk about the second pillar in the storytelling framework for digital mythology, and it's metaphors. If you've missed it, for some context to the overall storytelling framework, please have a look at the introductory episode to give you more context. Right, metaphors. Well, why are they useful? Well, I don't think any industry, maybe medical, but I still think digital technology is one of those industries that's most apt to using metaphors. The reason is because we're a bit of a nerdy bunch, right? We know our tech, and we heard the usual, propeller heads, don't send a techie into the room with the business executives, they'll scare the life out of them. Again, I'm using metaphors. But the reality is technology is hard. And it is, like, it's technical for a reason. And just the way people appreciate building a bridge requires lots of standards and technical codes, etc. Building out digital assets is the same. And so if I was, to ask a close colleague who works in structural engineering to explain to me how, what the construction requires to build an Eiffel Tower, I wouldn't get any further than 30 seconds into the conversation if they didn't start using metaphors, because I'm not an engineer. I'm not a structural engineer. And so this is why storytelling, the second pillar being metaphors, is so important to give a bit of thinking to. So last episode I spoke about Shin, which is the first pillar. Second pillar is metaphor. I've put that in the middle of the tree. Third one's catalyst. Metaphor's in the middle because it's kind of like the bridge, right? It's the bridge between the technical concepts, the dull narratives, the complex jargon, to build the bridge into business language, into customer-orientated language, into easy to understand concepts. And I think it's the duty of every technical leader and professional to debunk the whole technical jargon space. I think if someone wants to be impressive, then go and have a meeting with the leading vendor of, say, cyber tech and talk all about the cyber protocols, etc. there. But when you're trying to raise capital or go and explain to your business partners in the business why you have to invest in your cyber capability, you would be a lot more successful using metaphors. So metaphors. I think every story has metaphors, but the digital story needs more of them. Metaphors allow you to make your digital transformation story memorable. Allows it to be relatable. It allows it to be understood. And at the end of the day, you might have your Shin language ready to go, which is the heartfelt narrative, but you still need metaphors. So this episode today is about metaphors. I'll give you an example because I like examples. But again, please feel free to share your own. Let's talk about a conventional statement you might hear a lot is we need to streamline our data systems. Or you know what? I'll choose a different one. Let's talk about, the question you might get often is why you might hear from a business executive or a business partner or someone who's non-technical. Why do you need me involved in your digital transformation journey? I'm busy, and they are. And often historically, we've engaged non-technical people, business in digital transformation journeys that we've wasted their time. I wouldn't say everybody's wasted their time, but we've made it challenging for them. So often there's a bit of, post-traumatic stress disorder with, another big IT project. Why do you need me? And an example there would be, like a good metaphor to tackle that is we have to remember that our organizations are big and lots of staff do lots of different things. And regardless of what your capability model is for your business, there's going to very likely be corporate type business representatives, finance, HR, etc. There's going to be the operational type business people in your organization. And then don't forget there's the customer management side and there's the customer. So when we're trying to explain what digital transformation looks like and tell the story of digital transformation, we have to try to do it better. Good example would be the blind men and the elephant, right? So the blind men and the elephant is a nice one around. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's an ancient parable where we had. I think it was monks were asked to wear a blindfold and they were asked to walk up to an elephant. They weren't told it was an elephant. And they were allowed to touch part of it. And they were asked, what is it? And of course, the person touching the tail would feel it around and say, I think it's a snake. And the person touching the leg would they thought it was the trunk of a tree. And this is a good example where, of course, it was only until the blindfolds were removed that each of them seen the big picture. And that's why metaphors are important, because you can't try to tell or explain the big picture to everybody in your organization in a way that they will relate to. It's hard. And often they're used to their line of business. So if they're a risk professional, if they're a finance professional, if they're an operational out in the field staff member, they're used to working at that leg, if you will, or at the tail. That's typically their business. And yet digital transformation to be effective often requires breaking down the silos and explaining that, yes, you're part of the business, maybe using this system quite well, but the system doesn't serve other parts well, and it's inefficient and it has a high cost of ownership, so we're going to replace it with a more suitable solution. And again, that whole thing about explaining the big picture, what I would recommend you do is the first thing you do is you try to you pick a good metaphor that can help do that for each of the major stakeholder groups. Another typical question you might get is, what's in it for me? So it's probably the most common question you'll get when it comes to asking people to change or to adapt to new systems or to help you articulate a new digital transformation target state. Well, why? And again, another good metaphor to use there is you can think of it as, we need, digital today is enterprise. It's holistic. Again, I said earlier in my other episode, show me a system that lives in isolation. It doesn't. I mentioned about ecosystems before. We're all in an ecosystem here. And when it comes to what's in it for me, we really have to be cognizant of the fact that when we're introducing digital transformation change, each person has a different view of that elephant. They have a different view of the enterprise. So using a metaphor like planting seeds. So what's in it for you as a business executive? Well, what we're doing is we need some of your time now. We need you to tolerate and work with us. We're going to leave you with that suboptimal system for a while, but we're building out a new ERP or a new platform that we need your attention now to support us so that when we migrate you over to the new system, the seed has been planted so that it's future-proofed, so that later on we can without too much or without any, hopefully, additional spend, we can turn on those modules to serve your needs. That's an example when somebody doesn't see an immediate benefit to a digital transformation change. More examples, and another one I would be recommending as a metaphor is, you know, when someone in the business is let's say they're in finance or risk, right? And you're trying to introduce a whole new suite. Your digital transformation program has identified best of breed doesn't work anymore. Let's go to a suite. You need to bring these people on this journey. One of the metaphors you can use, and I haven't spoken about this, but I'll bring it up briefly now, is when you're choosing a metaphor, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, right? You want to use metaphors that are close to the person's general domain. So they're familiar with that concept. So, you know, if you're rolling out a new finance system, fine. You're talking to the finance stakeholders. They probably don't need much exotic metaphors other than, you know, because they understand the ground. They understand the ground of being, as in they understand what finance transformation looks like. But if you have to explain finance transformation to a non-finance person in your organization, which you do, because finance is enterprise, using a metaphor more aligned to their area is always better. So what I mean by double-edged sword is you can use a metaphor that's close to the ground of being, as in close to the person's area. So if it's a risk professional, you can always use risk as a metaphor when you're describing change that has to happen, say, outside their domain, right? But the challenge with that is using risk-related metaphors, let's just say Prometheus went up and stole fire from the gods, and he brought it down to the people. And he took an enormous risk doing that, and fire is dangerous. But the upside was we had innovation. To use that metaphor around risk versus reward, you can use that. Obviously, a risk professional would relate to that. But if you're trying to introduce them to something that's not risk related, you might want to think about using a metaphor that isn't so close to their ground, to their domain. The reason that is because a lot of people in general, we're humans and we work to the territory that we're familiar with. So I'm a techie. I work in technology. I'm almost trying to translate anything in my world. If I have to talk through whatever it is, family-based teenage drama or world politics, whatever, I can often try to project that onto the metaphor of technology, which I like to use. But I only know technology well. Sometimes I have to be taken out of technology into a different metaphor to better understand something. So that's why when I talk about metaphors, try to think a little bit outside the box. If it's and I've used that, it can work, but don't go too far outside the box, right? So examples would be, and I've recently started a new hobby, and examples would be, you might want to use, depends on your organization, but you can always use, example would be, why is it necessary now to do this change? An example I would use is riding the waves when you're surfing, right? So surfing's all about which wave do you catch? Do you catch it at the right time? And if you miss it, people who surf would know that if your timing's wrong, you don't paddle fast enough, you miss it. Now, that is, I'm not sure many organizations, I haven't worked with any clients actually where surfing is their core business, but surfing as a metaphor, most people can relate to the fact that you have to catch the wave at a certain time. So that's an example where taking people out of their domain entirely and using something that's relatable and people have seen it, they're familiar with it, is a powerful tool. So that's what the second pillar is about shifting people out of the mindset of what they're usually, how they frame and understand things, and using metaphors to do that. And I would suggest, I've done one recently with a client where I've introduced the village metaphor, where you have the head of digital, the chief, and then you have the digital transformation lead, the innovator, the strategic thinker and tool team, and that's the shaman. And then we have the architects, and they sit they're like the planners, and then you have the constructors, which is the build teams, the operations running the stuff. You can use a metaphor like holistically to describe your capability model. Again, it doesn't have to be too exotic, but it is often a powerful tool in storytelling. So to close, technical language is hard. What we do in digital transformation can often be misunderstood. And a way to combat that is to use simple, relatable, human-orientated metaphors, right? So the blind man with the elephant, surfing to catch the wave. Other ones would be, a well-tended garden. To look after the garden, I mentioned in a previous episode, you got to embrace life and death. You got to throw out the old and bring in the new. All of these metaphors are very powerful. And I'd like to invite your feedback. Would you like to share some of your own metaphors that you've used? And especially culturally, which ones you've used, which you feel come from a different culture, as opposed to the normal culture of your organization. I'd like to learn a bit more about that, but please feel free to share. But again, as the second pillar, I'd be encouraging you to take this one quite seriously. Don't have too many metaphors, but at least take a bit of time to say, how can we better explain this concept to stakeholder X? And then for stakeholder Y, you might want to use a different metaphor, whatever resonates best to invoke the shin.